Hi, welcome to Grounded Live. I'm Maritsa Georgiou with my co-host, former Senator John Tester, and we are so excited to welcome former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg to the show today.
Excited to be with you. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you here. Now, I don't know what we should call you. Do we call you Mayor or Secretary or Pete or
Let's just go with Pete. I think that's probably the right answer.
Pete's good. I had more. I mean, I was just getting started. Am I bouncing around on yours?
Oh,
Looks okay on my side.
Does it? Good.
looks fine with me. That's the thing about going live, Senator.
Driving me crazy. It's bouncing all over. But anyway, it's good to have the Honorable Pete Buttigieg here on our podcast. Look, we're going to go down a lot of different rabbit holes here today, and hopefully we don't get you in trouble. Okay. But I just want to start by saying, and this isn't bullshit, but you are probably the best spokesman for Democrats in the country right now. And one of the reasons is because when you talk, you're crystal clear and people can relate with what you're saying. So I used to be in that business, and that's really hard to do. That's really hard to do. It's really hard to talk and have people go, damn. I mean, that guy said shit I've never heard come out of a Democrat's mouth before. It makes perfect sense. And you get people agreeing with you that normally don't agree with you and move on. So I want to know how you do it. I mean, do you study? Is there somebody you study to figure out how to, because it's not only you giving speeches, it's not only, I mean, I watched you during the confirmation process when President Biden put you up as Secretary of Transportation. There's nobody during that confirmation process that even came close to the job you did as controlling the narrative. And so how do you do it?
I don't know if there's any magic to it. I do my homework. I think the biggest thing is, I grew up in a place where a lot of times I was swimming upstream. Indiana, somebody who had the values that I was brought up with didn't always match the environment around me. And so if I wanted to talk about what I believed, I had to really explain it in ways that made sense to the people around me. And I also think we miss sometimes how much, speaking and practicing politics is a two-way process. I mean, there's a lot of listening that goes into that, right? Hearing what's on people's minds, picking up their vocabulary about how they talk about the issues that they care about. And I especially felt that when I was running. First, when I was running for mayor, then when I was running for president. When somebody comes up to you, I'm sure you experienced this as a senator. When somebody comes up to you to talk to you about something, they're talking about the most important thing in their life, probably, at least the most important thing in their life that they think a politician could help with. And the way they talk about it hopefully stays with you. And then it's your job to turn around and when you're on TV or in some policy process in Washington to kind of convey that same urgency that they brought when they were grabbing you by the collar and looking you in the eye saying, you got to do something about this. And translate that back out into the policy world, which, as you know, doesn't always think and doesn't always talk in the same terms that most of us actually live our lives in.
So, yeah, what the hell? We'll go here. So when you going to announce for the run in 28?
When are you going to run for governor?
Well, I'm too old, man. You're just a young guy. I'm old, man. But you've got your whole life ahead of you, and you've got, you got young kids and all that stuff. Hell, my grandkids are even old, so, is this going to be something that you think you might do, or
I don't know. I mean, look, this is the first year in 15 years where I haven't either been running for office or in office of some kind. And I'm loving that. Don't get me wrong. I care passionately about what's happening in the country. I love public service. I love every public service job I've ever been able to do. But it's also been really important and really good to be the one who drops off the kids at school or at camp most days and to just put around the house and take care of things that have been building up for years needing to get done, and to be a better son and a better son-in-law and a better husband and a better dad. The other stuff will come. We'll figure out what to do with it. I'm not in a hurry to plunge in on that. I am in a hurry to speak out about what I care about. I mean, as you and I are talking, as you know, your former colleagues in the Senate are in the middle of voting through what I believe is a potentially a devastating blow to a lot of American families' healthcare. I'm going to always be involved in speaking out around these issues, but there's plenty of time to think about whether to jump on the ballot again.
Well, let's get into that a little bit. We have some headlines to get to, and I applaud the senator for jumping right into the question everybody is asking, though. But I do want to ask about this big, beautiful bill. We're in this votorama process. I mean, the Washington Post basically reported yesterday that it's the biggest cut ever to programs for low income Americans. It would increase the national debt by more than $3 trillion. So first, I want to send it over actually back to Senator Tester, because I want you to help us all understand, Senator, this votorama process. It's jargon used in the Senate and journalism fields, but a lot of people don't really understand what's happening. So can you walk us through what's happening right now on the Senate floor?
Well, it's an opportunity for senators to put up crazy goddamn amendments that make no sense whatsoever and then dare you to vote against them so that they can run ads. It has no impact whatsoever as far as the law itself goes. And so consequently, you go through all this stuff. And at the end of this whole process, this reconciliation process, they'll have a motion to either do away with all the amendments or adopt certain ones and not others. And so the whole process is just a dog and pony show that's set up just to put up political political traps to dare people to vote for things that they know aren't going to be in the final bill anyway. They're not going to be part of the equation. And so what happens to things like Medicaid, to SNAP. They took the public land stuff out before it hit to the floor. That's out, and now they have to work to get it back in. But as far as the other stuff, it's a big problem, and they're going to put up phony amendments to give people cover and to set up traps for others, and quite frankly, they don't mean a damn thing.
So one thing I
And
want to
Pete,
ask
I
you about is
know.
the sorry, didn't mean to step on you.
Yeah,
So
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you go
No,
ahead,
that's
Pete.
fine. You go ahead. You go ahead, Pete.
One thing I think is really important to remember is that these guys, by which I mean, the president and the congressional GOP, I think they've created the impression that they're this steamroller, that they never back down, nothing can stop them. When they decide that something's going to happen, resistance is futile, right? And yet we've seen time and time again that isn't true. The president backs down, congressional GOP changes their tune. So I was really interested by this piece that you mentioned, where the the public lands provisions, they changed that.
Yep.
And I'm wondering, as I'm, just like every other citizen, kind of, all I know is what I see in the news, but I'm seeing, you mentioned a lot of these are kind of meaningless message votes, but you also see some of these changes that are happening behind the scenes, from kind of obscure things like they had a tax break for tanning beds, and then they were so embarrassed about it that they took it back out. I'm wondering if they're on some of the bigger provisions too, if it's still possible to protect some of the rural hospitals that are going to get shut by this, to protect some of the Americans who are going to get kicked off Medicaid, or whether you do think at this point the thing is pretty much locked up and it's going to be what it's going to be, and it's going to just march on through this process.
Normally, I would say it is pretty much locked up, but I will tell you, I've heard so much stuff about people being concerned about the Medicaid portions, the SNAP portions, kicking people off, rural hospitals closing. But I think the only way it happens, Pete, is if the vote goes down on the final vote and they go back and rework it. That's the only way it happens. I'm going to tell you, I watched Ben Nelson, the former senator from Nebraska, get taken apart on Obamacare because of
Mm-hmm.
something called a Cornhusker kickback. And every time I bring up the news, there's all sorts of Cornhusker kickbacks for people in this bill. And the only thing I'm going to say is, if it was good enough for Nebraska and Obamacare, it should have been good enough for the whole country. If it's good enough for another state now, whether that's Alaska or Maine or whatever, and I love those folks, but the truth is, if it's good enough for them, it should be good enough for the whole country. You shouldn't have to carve out certain states just to get their vote. I mean, that's why politics stink, quite frankly. That's why
Yeah.
everybody in Washington, D.C. has single digit ratings, because people see that and it doesn't pass the smell test and they go, this is bullshit. And they shouldn't be getting away with that crap. But oftentimes they do. and it's just a bad situation. Let me ask you something. It's hard to keep track of the House bill, the Senate bill, and all that. But if you were going to give me your top three, this is bullshit in this bill. What would your top three be?
My top three are: number one, massive tax cuts for the rich. They don't need them. Most people think that's wrong, and it's going to be incredibly expensive. And so I think that's something that, look, obviously, a lot of conservatives continue to push for even more tax cuts for the wealthy, but most Americans get that that's not the right thing to do. That's one. Two, massive expansion of the deficit. And here's something that I would like to think conservatives could agree on, and of course, some of them are speaking up about this, adding trillions of dollars to the national debt. And look, I get that neither party has covered itself in glory on the issue of deficits and the debt. Although I would also point out that as a general matter, you've seen better handling of the debt under Democratic presidents than Republican presidents. But bottom line, you've got a bunch of supposedly conservative senators going out there on the floor on purpose, increasing the national debt by trillions. And then the third, the one that people are actually going to feel fastest, is kicking people off their health care. The latest numbers I saw in the Senate bill have even more Americans losing health insurance than in the House version of it. I think 11.8 is the last number that I heard. That's insane. Nobody is better off when fewer Americans are insured. It's horrible if you lose your insurance. It's also horrible for everybody else in the community when members of your community can't get care. And then, of course, if they're not getting treated, they're going to wind up in the emergency room with a much more serious issue and a much more expensive treatment than if they had the insurance that got them to the doctor, got them to the hospital, got them the preventative care. I think people get this. And I think it's one of the many reasons why this bill is profoundly, profoundly unpopular. And of course, these things are all related, right? They're kicking people off healthcare in order to free up money to pass on to the wealthiest in this country in the form of tax cuts, and still adding trillions to the deficit as they do it. It makes no sense. It's wrong, and we can do better. And look, if there was a serious effort to cut the deficit, I'd be all about it. If there was a serious effort to rethink our tax code, I'd be all about it. This is not that.
No, that's for sure.
I do want to ask, though, I mean, like, we can talk about the short-term issues, right? Like, we're cutting all of these supposed costs to create tax breaks for the wealthy. But when we think about, like, the threats to rural hospitals, let's say, when we when we think about funding a stronger ICE to deport more people who pay taxes in this country, what are the long-term impacts here financially and economically?
Look, I think there's a reason why a lot of the provisions in this bill are set to kick in 2029. What that says to me is they know that they will be doing a lot of damage to people's lives, and they don't want the political damage or the backlash over that to hit until this president's out of office or people have kind of moved on to be debating something else. The longer you play this out, the worse it gets. When you're cutting food, when you're cutting healthcare, also when you're cutting research, look, you might not notice overnight unless you're one of the researchers that a big research effort got cut. But over time, especially when they're cutting everything from research that could help with cancer to things like preventing suicide among veterans, I mean, the longer you let that go, the further America falls behind. People get hurt. Other countries who do invest in research will, over time, be eating our lunch. And it is the opposite of America first. See, to me, America first means America, at least the right way to think of America first, is wanting America to be in first place. But America can only be in first place if we make these investments. If we short them, it's penny wise and pound foolish. And yeah, to your question, the longer this goes on, the worse off we're going to be.
So my question to both of you is about Senator Tom Tillis, because he voted against advancing this bill on Saturday, and he talked about the concerns over Medicaid cuts and the issues that Republicans will face back home. But then, I saw another lawmaker on the Sunday show saying, no, the public, their voters, their base will actually rebel if they don't vote for this. And then I heard another political strategist on one of the networks today saying that if he had a Republican client, he would advise them to vote for it and hope it fails. What does this all tell you
Wow.
about the state of our— I know that was my reaction too. Wow. What does this tell you about the state of our political system right now, that you can't go against anything that the president wants if you're in that party, and if you would advise your client to vote for it and hope it fails, why don't we just vote for what we believe in and vote against what we don't believe in?
You first, Pete. You first.
I mean,
And I
you
know
know,
that, by the way, that's really bad form on my part because it's never good to follow Pete Buttigieg. I'm just telling you.
no, I
Right.
mean,
That's a bad look on you.
Got out.
call it quaint, but I think you ought to vote for things you think are a good idea and vote against things you think are a bad idea. I mean, that's what what citizens hire their representatives to do. And this idea of hoping that it won't pass, or the other interesting thing you're talking about, that those kind of state by state carve outs earlier. Uh, you know, Usually when I see that sort of thing, it's creating some extra benefits for a certain state. At least what you're saying is like, all right, this is kind of a mixed bag, but you're gonna shower some funding on my state. I'll come along with it. Here, some of the carve outs are actually to make sure this bill doesn't apply as much in certain states, which means they know that it hurts the Americans that it does apply to. This is no way to make policy, and I do think there's going to be a price for it if people can stay organized. When I think about Tom Tillis, and I'm sure Senator Tester, you worked with him much more closely than I did. I worked with him quite a bit. We definitely did not agree. I mean, this is not a liberal Republican. He is a conservative Republican, but also somebody who really cares about his state. And we worked on getting bridge funding to North Carolina. We worked very closely on dealing with the hurricane, and he stood up with just so much passion on making sure that things like rebuilding the roads that got destroyed by the hurricane happened. And he's somebody clearly who is just fed up with the politics of this, and the idea that showing that kind of integrity is disqualifying in today's Senate GOP tells you everything about how far off the rails they've gone. And I think that again, I don't. There's lots of things I really don't agree with them, but on it. But I think that, put it this way, I think history will look a lot more kindly on Tom Tillis than it will on this bill. I don't know if we lost
So I
John.
need
Is
to.
he still here?
We did. We lost.
Okay.
We lost John. He will come back. I've re-invited him. This is kind of the thing about doing Substack Live, or maybe he just bowed out because he didn't want to follow what Pete Buttigieg had to say. But we will get him back online here. But as long as we're talking about that, I mean, what do you think is going to happen with this? I mean, I was watching Senator Murkowski because some of the provisions that she had worked out for Alaska, the Senate parliamentarian said, no, those have to go. And then we have Senator Tillis now. I mean, do you think that if we get to voting actually in the full Senate, do you think they'll pass this?
That's one where I really would defer to John. I mean, what I know is that the Senate has been a little bit more clear headed than the House at some of these moments, and we've definitely seen certain senators show some backbone here. But I think in many ways the answer to your question is up to us. Again, we've shown that if
Mm.
something is bad enough and people speak out enough, even these people who supposedly say they'll never ever back down on anything back down. They change course. They change their tune. And so I think the answer to the question of whether the Senate will actually pass this, whether all of these harms will come to pass, whether we're actually going to put that much more into our deficit, whether that many Americans are actually going to wind up losing their health care because of those votes that happened today. In many ways, I think that's a function of just how outspoken the American people are, especially if you are represented by a Republican senator. And everybody should be burning up the phones. I know it sounds old fashioned, and sometimes it feels like you're hitting a brick wall, but it's a good day for anybody to call their senator. But I defer to John on predicting whether something like this is really going to make it through.
Well, first of all, I froze up, and I'm sorry. I don't know if I ever got off or if I'm still frozen on another line. But
No, we have you back. We have
We
you
got you.
back.
okay, good. I would just say a couple things. Number one, um, I think leadership brought this up with full intentions of it's going to pass. I don't think they'd have brought it up if they didn't think it was going to pass. So there probably were some commitments made before the vote to move to this bill happened. But You're exactly right, Pete. There's a lot of things that are fundamentally wrong with this bill that need to be fixed. And I think a lot of people are sitting there going, this increases the national debt. I've been railing on national debt for 10 years. Now I got to vote for a piece of legislation that increases the national debt to give rich people tax breaks. Okay. And then you've got other people to say, hey, this cuts Medicaid. It's going to ruin my rural hospitals, come from a rural state. And it's going to, and the list goes on and on and on and on. The renewable energy tax credits stuff that are taken away. Like we're going to spend more money on natural disasters now. I mean, really? Come on. At any rate, so there's that. And then I would just tell you that the person who says vote for it and hope it fails is the epitome of no accountability. That's the person who says, yeah, I'm going to say, yeah, I voted for all those tax breaks, but thank God it failed because now we didn't increase the national debt. So that's crazy. And as far as Tillis goes, because I don't know if you guys got into Tom or not, but Tom Tillis deciding not to run for reelection is one of the things that's wrong with our political system today. Now, I don't know if Tom would have won or not, probably, but maybe not. I don't know. But Tom's a decent guy. And I get on this podcast all the time and I talk about friends I served with. And then I get a lot of pushback saying, well, how could they be friends if they confirm the cabinet? Or how can they be friends if they say that the president has the right to put tariffs on when it's really Congress's job? And the list goes on and on and on. Tom Tillis is a prime example of somebody who works in a bipartisan way to try to get things done. Do I agree with him all the time when I was in the Senate? Hell no. But I agreed with him enough where he was a pleasure to work with. And now he's going to be gone. That's too bad.
So, Senator, I mean, do you think if you're in that position where what would you advise Tom Tillis to do if you were his advisor? Stay in and fight
I would just like I would anybody who's doing anything. You stay there and fight. You don't quit. And but look, it's painful, and we have seen the president do this time and time and time again. If you disagree with him, you're an evil person, so we're going to get rid of you. And that's exactly what he told Tillis a few days ago. I don't think that's why Tillis made the decision. I think Tillis had this decision made months ago, quite frankly. I just think the timing is really bad.
But it also
I
seems to
wanted
me
to
like it
ask you,
shows
Senator.
something time and time again. We've seen these Republican House members or senators who cross the president and then immediately end their careers.
Yeah.
And part of why I was curious to talk about this with you is you're an example of a Democratic senator who did not always vote with the Democratic president, did not always vote with the party. Sometimes that, senators who were more moderate didn't win their reelections, but you do not see the same pattern on the Democratic side, right? Where people who stand up to their own party just decide they can't have a career in politics anymore. And I wonder why you think those two things are so mismatched.
I don't know. All I know is that there's nobody out there that when you say what you believe or you vote the way you go, that's the head of a party that says you are bad and you do not deserve to be back here because everything I do is right. I'm all knowing and I'm going to make the calls. And if you go against me, then by God, I'm going to have your head on a pike. And the truth is that's a bunch of crap. And we've talked to this before. We talked to people who've been close with the president who aren't close with the president anymore, and they all say that there's no tolerance for any diversity. For Christ's sakes, when did diversity become a bad thing? That's my question. It's crazy. And so there's no tolerance for diversity. So it's my way or the highway. And guess what, Pete? Not even you are right all the time. So getting those different opinions, and you're pretty damn smart, and
You
getting
sound
those
like
different
Justin.
opinions are important. It's important.
For sure.
I
I
was going
gotta
to
say
say
though,
that
I never
about
thought about that.
Maritsa, but you're second level, Pete. You're second level. Okay.
Yeah. No, I know that. I have to say I feel kind of bad for Chasten. I don't know if I'd want to go up against Pete in a domestic disagreement there. That he
Oh,
is
believe me,
very
he is the
smart.
most convincing member of this household.
Oh, okay. So I do want to say though, I mean, on that note, this is not like it's just to this party. It's really, I think it's singular to this president. I don't remember past presidents putting out social media posts about specific people. I mean, just yesterday, President Trump put out a post about the parliamentarian,
I
calling
knew
for
that was coming.
Republicans to defy her.
You knew that was
Yeah.
coming.
So where does that
I mean, to me, it's a really clear pattern where anything and anyone that has any independence is gonna have a target on their back under this presidency. It's any Republican who shows independence from their party, any agency that shows that independently shows respect for the Constitution, which is part of why you saw so many generals replaced almost on day one, and any organization or office that is designed to be independent, from the Smithsonian to the university system to the private sector and all these law firms he's going after, to the Senate parliamentarian who could not be a less partisan. And definitely drove both parties crazy by calling those balls and strikes. But the one thing that this president can't tolerate is anybody just calling balls and strikes.
Yeah, there's got to be an agenda behind everything that's being done. There can't be doing it just because it's the right thing to do by the Constitution, you know? Hey,
Okay, so we
I got
talked
to,
a lot about this bill. Go ahead, Senator.
no. Talk. Here's my question. Okay, I will. I'll take you up on that, Maritza. So you've been in a position of leadership before, and here's what I can't figure out. How can President Trump say things like, "We're not going to cut Medicaid. We're absolutely not going to cut Medicaid," and then he cuts Medicaid, and people don't see through that?
Mhm.
And you can say the same thing just about on everything. I always bring up, he said, you know what? These big meat companies shouldn't be doing self inspection. They should have inspectors in there, independent inspectors from FDA doing the inspection. Then he cuts FDA. So you got nothing, but he does it all the time. How does he get away with it?
I mean, I think a couple things are going on, right? One is we should give credit to folks who do see through it. I think it's really interesting that the last tax bill, the tax cuts for the wealthy that passed first time around, represented the most unpopular that Donald Trump ever was in his first term. So I think people do see things that we don't always give them credit for. But the other side of it is, I think most people getting through life right now are just getting absolutely bombarded by all of these different stories, all of this different information or different stuff claiming to be information. And especially as people in my generation and younger aren't really turning to news sources that have editors and people who have to live up to journalistic standards. And it's more and more just kind of stuff hitting you in the face on Instagram or um, TikTok or Discord or wherever people are getting their information. I think that part of the cost of that is that there is less of that kind of connecting of the dots between he said this and he did that. He made this promise and then he broke it. I think people can still feel it a little bit, but we have to work 10 times harder to make sure that there is that connection at a moment when there's so many outrages, so many
Mhm.
insults, so many dramas happening every single day that you can't even remember. By the time he breaks a promise today, you can't even remember what that promise was yesterday because 10 other things happened in between.
So Pete, we've talked about this, and it's easy to forget that the three of us live in somewhat of an information vacuum. Like we are so plugged in, way more than a lot of people. A lot of my own friends, will ask me questions, and I just forget that people don't consume news like I do. So how would you overhaul the system? How do we all do a better job of getting information out there without sounding patronizing, without alienating people away from it, or overwhelming people?
Well, I know it's a bit ironic because I'm saying this in a digital conversation, but I think one of the most important things is the power of the offline. Just like being in a conversation with somebody, I think that makes any one of us more credible. And I think we're also more likely to hear what somebody else has to say because if all we hear of the other side is their craziest online expressions, we forget like very real reasons, the very real people who are smart and ethical in our lives wind up believing things that politically make no sense to us. And that doesn't mean that we're going to switch what we think necessarily, but it does mean that we'll understand where folks are coming from and it'll lead to a better vocabulary. The other thing I'm just a big believer in is that we do have to differentiate between some dude on the internet, and for these purposes, I would count the three of us in that in that category at this moment. Right, we're sharing what we think, we're offering opinions, we have ideas. I think everything I've said today is factual, but honestly, if I said something that wasn't factual, there would not be kind of instant accountability for that in this format, right? So we just need to distinguish between that, which has its place, and actual journalism, where people get fired if they didn't double check with two sources that something was credible. I mean, I don't know your experience, Senator, but there were so many times when I was so mad at the newspaper that covered me when I was mayor, or held the New York Times or Fox Digital covering me when I was secretary. But anytime I actually caught anything that was factually not true and said,
Oh, are you there, Senator? We are. I think the three of us are all struggling with a little bit of
I'm
connectivity
I'm
problems.
I'm here, but I don't think Pete's here now.
Oh, well, let's invite him back. He dropped out. Man, next I'm gonna drop out. This will
I
be this will
Look,
be
I tried to get back onto my iPad, and you know what it said? Your invitation has been revoked. So well, you know, so I had to go get my iPhone again.
sorry, my
oh
turn to be the problem
boy.
child there.
Like
Sorry about that.
He's
I dropped
back.
off, but
it
I'm back.
sounds like
I feel
there
better
he
now.
is. We're back.
Yeah. I thought I was the only odd man out. Now you're an odd man out too, man. So it's the way it is.
I'm next. I'm
You're
next.
next. It's coming. Well,
But I
I
think
think
you're right, Pete. I think you're right about that. We need to be better about being in person. And you do such a great job of that. You go onto podcasts and on shows and on Fox News all the time, and or at least you had been, and you really go in and try to clear things up. And I mean, I applaud you. I applaud you for that.
so. Can I ask a question off of that? Can you give me
Yeah.
your favorite experience that you had on Fox News?
Oh wow. Um, Favorite. Uh, we had a couple of pretty good rumbles on the Sunday shows where they kept coming with this angle they had, and I just luckily had enough facts at hand to be like, wait a minute, this is the actual fact there, and um, you know, it's always just you're stepping through the looking glass a little bit with these Fox folks, but I know that there are people watching in good faith, getting their information,
Yeah.
getting informed by watching that, and that's who I'm talking to. I try to talk right past the camera in the control room and just talk to the person who's looking, or maybe the person who's married to the person who picked what channel is going to be on the TV that day. And I've gotten so much good feedback for doing that. They don't seem to be having me on as often as they used to, but I always think it's worth doing.
Well, I can tell you that I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but on the Commerce Committee, when you were being confirmed as Secretary of Transportation, one of the people on the other side of the aisle was coming after you, and man, they had the daggers out. And before you got done with the Q&A that the guy was asking you, he was agreeing with everything you were saying. And I was sitting there watching this whole thing going, I wish they had this on video, because this should be shown as this is how you go through a confirmation process and end up on the right side of the ledger. I didn't check to see if the guy voted for you or not. I don't know, but the truth is that
Probably not.
in committee he loved you in the end. Pretty amazing. I mean, pretty amazing, because I've watched people get totally ripped apart in that process. It's like going through a meat grinder, and trust me, I've had some experience with a meat grinder, so it's tough.
I do want to get to, some FAA stuff if we can,
Mm.
because I mean, you love the Department of Transportation, and we have seen so many things come up. And again, like, when we saw the plane crash in Washington, D.C., that was all the news all the time for a couple of days. And now, I mean, how many months later, and there's so much coming at us intentionally that we can't possibly keep up. But I do want to ask you kind of what you think watching all this stuff unfold, like the Doge cuts at the FAA, some of these air traffic issues. I mean, the whole thing with Newark and that air traffic controller telling people not to fly there because it's unsafe. How do you process all of that, and what do you make of it?
Look, I think anytime you're in a role like the role I had, it's hard to watch your successor, even if it's somebody you agreed with from your own party, let alone somebody who has just a very, very different approach. Uh, uh, Let me begin by saying, like, just as an American, as a member of the traveling public, like, I want the FAA to succeed. I want the secretary to succeed because their mission is to keep our transportation systems safe and functional, and we should all be rooting for that. The FAA has needed to be upgraded and improved for a long time. We asked for the funding to do that, just to show you how Congress works these days. My request for funding, right, the fiscal 25 budget request, is still out there waiting. I mean, we back. This goes back to as long as when I was in office, and we still haven't gotten that kind of regular budget. We had a whole plan to get more capital dollars in that would allow the FAA to upgrade a lot of the equipment that needs to change, because there's really two big issues there. There's the technology, and then there's the workforce, and making sure that the number of controllers is growing. I don't know if the number of controllers is growing anymore. I know that it was falling for 30 years. I know that we turned that around, and by the time I left, it was growing. And I know that every air traffic control in the country got an email telling them they should consider leaving and doing something more productive, only for the administration to say, oh, well, that was just a mistake. That email was never for them. So obviously it's chaotic. I would never recommend firing a bunch of IT people before checking whether they were good at their job and what exactly it was they were doing. There's some things that happen right out of the gate that, frankly, make it harder for the agency and the secretary to succeed. But look, this should be the most bipartisan thing ever. I mean, aviation safety is something that you don't have to be a Democrat or Republican to care about. Any one of us who gets on an airplane should care about it. And by the way, aviation, flying on an airplane in this country is still the safest way to travel. I wish there was as much attention to roadway safety as there is to aviation safety. We could save thousands of lives if we got better at that as a country. Again, it improved on my watch, but we got a long way to go.
So, as long as we're just kind of shooting the shit here, um, if you were if you were in a if look, if you were elected president of the United States, if you were elected president of the United States, I'm not saying you're running. I'm saying if you were elected, what do you think the number one issue facing this country is, and how would you solve it?
Well, boiling it down to one is tough. I'll say this. I think there's a very good chance that even with all the political upheaval that's going on, even with all the international security issues that are going on, even with the inequality, which I think in many ways actually is the core issue in our country right now. But even with that, there's a good chance that the biggest thing to confront the next president will be the implications of artificial intelligence. And I say that not from a tech perspective. You don't have to be into technology for this to be high on your radar. I mean, in terms of what it's like to be an American, what it's like to apply for a job, what it's like to live in a community. Like, all of that is changing faster than we realized. I think we are underreacting. When I say we, I mean America, but I also mean my political party needs to do a better job of talking about this and putting forward proposals on what to do about this. And again, I'm not just talking about the technology. Regulating the technology could wind up being something that looks like the easy part compared to what you do with the politics and the economy of a country, where entire sectors of work radically change in 5 years or less. And I think that's what's happening as we speak.
Senator, you're not entirely off base because there was this Emerson College poll that showed that Pete Buttigieg was the candidate most favored by Dems for 2028. So I appreciate you trying to throw that in one more time. But Pete, I do want to ask you, because I know we are running out of time. I mean, you recently talked to one of our favorites here, Heather Cox Richardson, about our country's darkest demons and how even some of the most difficult moments in our history led to some of the brightest spots. And so I'm wondering, kind of, how do you unplug from all of this?
Mm.
And B, how do you stay hopeful while also not completely checking out?
Well, it really helps to have little kids in your life. I got two twins, our son and our daughter. They're about to turn 4. They're very good at holding me accountable as a dad, and they could care less what was on the news yesterday. They want to know if they're getting ice cream, and they want to know who's dropping them off and who's picking them up. When I've dealt with a lot of problems that are important, but when I hear, as I did the other night, I'm on a phone call on our deck. I think I put the kids to bed, and our son comes down and says, "Papa, Papa." I say, "What?" He says, "Penelope needs you to come wipe her butt." Um, that is a problem that is not just important but urgent, and that nobody else can take care of. At least not if I'm home alone. And so, that I think really helps you. But of course, it also like resets you for politics and why it all matters. Like, look, I get the temptation to check out. Like, I feel it, and I live and breathe this stuff. And I know a lot of people feel so disempowered or so cynical that you'd rather just binge watch some TV show and not have to think about politics and just get on with life. But politics is going to find you one way or the other, and I know it's going to find my kids one way or the other. And by the time they're old enough to ask me what I was doing back in the 2020s, as they realize just how much they had on the line in these decisions that are about to get made, I know that I have an obligation to tell them that I was there for this stuff, and so the very thing that makes me want to some days makes me want to step out of it all is the same thing that pulls me right back in.
Well, Pete Buttigieg, I can't thank you enough for being on our podcast. We're going to respect your time. And if I let Maritsa do this, she'd be on here till 4 or 5 o'clock tonight. So, but just wanted to say, I had an opportunity, Maritsa, to be on the same fellowship roster as Pete Buttigieg at the University of Chicago, and he's a rock star, man. That's all I can tell you. He's a rock star. The office was crowded every day, trying to get in, but I did weasel breakfast out of him, and I think I even made him pay.
Oh, well,
Well,
that
I
sounds
took you to a
just like
place I could
you.
afford. There's a nice diner on 57th Street. Next time will be your turn. But I was proud to have you as a colleague there, and proud to know you. Loved working with you in the Senate, and love to see how you're going to use your voice going forward.
Back at you on all that stuff. Thanks, Pete.
Take care.
Thank you so much, Pete. We appreciate it.
Be well.
Okay, Senator, we'll wrap this up if we can keep our internet connections solid. That was stressful. Like it would go in and out, and I'm glad seems like we're solid now. But I wanted to just again for people who are for joining us. I'm Maritsa Georgiou alongside former Senator Jon Tester of Montana, and we host this little show podcast Substack called Grounded, and we interview people like Pete. Well, he's like a pretty high bar guest, but we interview some really amazing people on this show weekly, and I'm just so grateful for him. That was a great conversation. It went by so fast.
Yeah, look, everybody likes Pete. Pete's got a way with words, and he can boil things down to real understandable terms. But I will also tell you this, as far as some of our other guests, some of the ones you expect are going to be, kind of boring, are the ones that light it up. And so,
Yeah.
and we've had a lot of lit lights. Let's put it that way. So it's been good. But look, uh, Pete's an interesting dude because he kind of burst onto the political scene, a few cycles ago, and he's still there and he's still talking, and he's one of the best there is, in my opinion, anyway, as far as delivering message that regular people can connect with. And I think that's his strength, and I think that's what makes him popular with folks all over the country. And we'll see.
Yeah, and in a way,
Go ahead.
oh, go ahead. I was gonna say in a way that's not mean or rude or condescending. I mean, he's just so even. But I appreciate you got in twice about the White House. I plan to ask him some rapid fire easy questions like, his favorite junk food and then asking him what color his dream house is, but we didn't get there.
Oh, damn. You had an agenda, and I didn't know about it. So that's the way it is. You got to
By
tell me.
asking Senator Tester about his hat and if he's frozen. Are you frozen? There we go. Okay, Hellgate Anglers? What does it say? Hellgate, Montana Anglers?
Hellgate Hunters and Anglers. I wore this hat because the public lands part was out of that big, beautiful bullshit bill that they're voting on right now. And one of the groups that really stepped up and made their voices heard were the Hellgate Hunters and Anglers. It's a national group named after Hellgate Canyon and just outside of Missoula, and they do a really good job making sure that, in a very nonpartisan, bipartisan way, however you want to put it, making sure that hunters and fishermen's voices are heard, especially when it comes to public lands, especially when it comes to habitat, especially when it comes to access. The list goes on and on.
Yeah, we saw so many different groups from all sides of the aisle, all ends of the political spectrum really get behind this and fight against the public land sell-off. So, it does show that voices do matter, and your voice does matter. A little bit of housekeeping. I just want to let people know and give you an opportunity to respond, Senator, if you want. I am keeping a close eye on this shooting of firefighters in Idaho, just down the road from me, about 3 hours from me, 2.5 hours. Basically, the authorities say that a man set a brush fire to ambush these firefighters. He shot and killed 2 of them, according to authorities. 1 is injured, and officials say he was just in a sniper stand, and that this ambush went on for hours before they found him. Horrific news that we are paying attention to. Anything you want to say about that, Senator?
Well, look, a couple weeks ago, we saw a guy impersonating a police officer walk in and shoot elected officials in Minnesota. Now we're seeing this kind of crap happening where a guy sets a fire, sets the side of a mountain on fire, and then calls in the first responders to shoot him. I don't know what the hell's going on in people's minds. I don't understand. I don't understand the lack of respect for guns. I don't get it. But obviously mentally ill, really, really fucking bad mentally ill. And if he's the one that they found dead up there, it's just too bad. It's just too bad. I mean, first responders are so really, really important. And I think the parallels between this and what happened in Minnesota are very, very, very equivalent, where you have people going in trying to help people, and some idiot takes a gun out and shoots them. It's nuts. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and our firefighters, especially out west, I mean, our wildfire seasons have only gotten more extreme, and it's a really scary thing for these communities to go through. And these firefighters save our communities; they literally save our houses, our communities, and to have that come up and have that happen, it's just terrifying. And we're waiting for some more details. A little bit of housekeeping, though, I do want to mention that we are going to be on with Chris Matthews tomorrow on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, we have Miles Taylor on, and he's going to be live with us. He's that former national security official who wrote under the pen name Anonymous under the first Trump administration, also named by name in an executive order. So we look forward to chatting with him. Anything I'm missing?
I don't know. He's one of those guys who disagreed with Trump, so look out.
Yeah, you get an executive order with your name in it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone for joining us. We just appreciate the support. And you can find us right here, of course, on Substack, Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube. You can shoot us an email anytime at groundedpcast@gmail.com. This only works because of supporters and people like you who join us on this adventure every week. We want to thank our guest, Pete Buttigieg, former transportation secretary, our friends at Pearl Jam who let us use their music on the podcast version of this, and to all of you, our listeners and subscribers. Thanks so much.
Tally ho.